Good evening, everyone. It is February 21st. We're getting there. We're almost through the month. I think this is when the time speeds up a little bit. And what better way to spend that time than attending a webinar. Tonight, you are going to be hearing about problem-based learning. Pretty excited to experience this webinar with you. Lots of interaction happening to it. We welcome Jennifer as a presenter to the OTF Connects webinar group. And she is going to be sharing many resources with you. She's got terrific personal experience, and please enjoy the evening. If at any time you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. So Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you, Trish. So good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. It's great to see people from all across the province here with us. My name is Jen Kranenberg, and I'm currently an elementary math coach with the Lambton-Kent District School Board. This is my first year in the role. Previous to this, I taught everything from grade 2 to grade 6 with the Lambton-Kent District School Board. And I first started my journey through problem-based learning about 4 years ago, and I really started as a result of my students being disengaged. It felt like we were kind of just going through the motions every day when they were coming to school, and I wanted to find a way to have them be more active participants in their own learning journey. And that really led me to problem-based learning, and we've had great success with that. So I'm pretty excited to be here and share that journey with all of you tonight. So the goals for this evening really are going to be to understand what is problem-based learning, to explore how to develop a good question to guide your journey, and then to look at how we can create an action plan. And we have a second session planned for March 20th, and we will provide those details at the end of this session as well. And during that session, we will look more at cross-curricular opportunities and what assessment can look like. So if you have any questions as we go along, please just pop them into the chat box. If something comes up down the road that you didn't think to ask tonight, you can always reach out to me either via Twitter or my email, and I'd be happy to connect with you that way as well. So before we get started, I'm just wondering if everybody could use that the common tools that Trish showed us, and if they could just check in and let me know what it is you teach. You might teach more than one grade. You can check in both spots. If you're an other, you can check that box and perhaps even let us know in the chat box what it is that you are involved in within the school. So I see a couple of people from primary. Oh, K to 12, great. Grade 3, grades 4 to 8. Oh, awesome, a STEM consultant. So we have a wide range here. This is great. Grade 9 to 12. Awesome. Okay. So I'm hoping that the way that we've structured this today will address the needs of all of the grades that are mentioned here. And we've found some ways to differentiate so everybody can kind of learn based on their division. So let's move right into what is problem-based learning. And this is where you're going to find your first Padlet. So there is a link on the slide here, and I believe Trish puts that into the chat box for us. There it is. Thank you, Trish. And I'm just wondering if you could click on that link, and if you could go into Padlet and just using either one word or a brief sentence, just what is it that you perceive problem-based learning to be at this point? And when you are done doing that, when you come back to the chat, if you could just check in here by using the smiley face, or actually I guess we should use the raise hand. If you raise your hand when you come back, then I will know you're back. Right, and I'm just going to pop over to the Padlet here. I can see somebody's getting started here. And if you do have any problems with the link, if you can just let us know within the chat box or add your ideas in the chat box, that's great too. Okay, so I see some using real-world problems to make connections to curriculum, cross-disciplinary, giving students a chance to solve authentic real-world problems prior to giving them all of the details. Yes. Learning through problem solving. Using real-world problems as a basis and a starting point to engage students. Overarching questions. I don't know yet. That's great. Perfect. And we can discover that together tonight. It's authentic. Let's see. Multi-level strategies to engage learning to solve meaningful problems to their age level. All right. And as Trish mentioned earlier, sometimes there's a little bit of a lag. So if you have completed the Padlet, if you can just raise your hand quickly here and let me know in the chat, and I will move on. Awesome. Good. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so it looks like a good number of us have completed that, and we will continue moving on. You can go ahead and unraise your hand. That's perfect, and that Padlet will be up, so you can always go back in and take another look or add some more ideas. So when I began my journey into problem-based learning, to be quite honest, I was really confused. I wasn't exactly sure what it was, and I went online and I did a lot of online searching, and I found I was coming up with some different definitions, and it was through my own experience and through really digging into the different definitions that existed that I kind of came up with the definition that you will see on the page here, which is that it's a model that engages students in learning through problem solving as they seek to find solutions to issues that are relevant to their own lives. And really here, the key words to me are that it engages students, that we have the problem solving, and that it is relevant. Those are the key words here. So this definition for me might change over time. I'm not really sure, but for now, this is the one that I'm working with. So in these pictures here, you can see that I had some students, and this was a school I was teaching at that had, it was a lower socioeconomic demographic, and these kiddos were really interested in figuring out how they could make fresh produce more accessible to their families. And so we decided to start growing vegetables in the school, and then as they became too large, we actually took it outside and we had classroom garden. And from this, many students started gardening at home. This was a theme that you will see come up many times throughout the webinar. Food security was an issue that was really important to the students in this school. So that's kind of a common theme throughout. So part of the confusion that I had around defining problem-based learning was that there are all kinds of based learning models out there. So if you do a web search, you've probably come up with at least these three. There's problem-based, there's project-based, there's challenge-based, there's many more. And I just want to take a moment to talk about what are these and how are they similar, how are they different, and does it matter which one you use? So project-based and problem-based, sorry, I'm tripping over all of my based models here. Both of these models see the students presented with a problem, and so you can see that right here. They're presented with the problem, whereas in challenge-based learning, which is an Apple initiative, the students are exposed to a big idea and then they develop that problem on their own. So I want to talk about this piece because despite the fact that we say students are presented with a problem, that does not always mean that we are defining the problem for them and saying this is what you have to solve. So tonight, as we travel through this journey, we will be looking at how can we kind of set the stage for that problem to emerge from the tasks and the activities that we're doing in the classroom. Students really seem to become more engaged and take more ownership when they have developed that problem on their own. In problem-based, project-based, and challenge-based learnings, you will see that there are multiple solutions that may exist. So this is not just where there's one easy solution to the problem. In problem-based learning, we have students working together to identify solutions to the problem and develop an action plan. So the key difference here is that they do not actually have to solve the problem. They might just come up with a solution and propose that. They might have time to carry it out, but if they don't, then that's okay. Whereas in project-based learning, the goal is really to create that project, and that is the same in challenge-based learning. All three of them are cross-curricular, and in problem-based and challenge-based learning, the learning really occurs throughout the journey, and assessment is ongoing. Whereas project-based learning, you could choose to do it that way, but often the assessment occurs at the end. So it's a final project that they are being assessed on. Challenge-based learning is different in the sense that it explicitly says that you are carrying out the action plan through or with the use of technology. So that being said, I think in most of our classrooms we are in a position where we do have a lot of technology available to us, and there is a good chance that that technology is being used in all three of these models. So I wanted to talk about these simply because they are so connected that as we go through tonight, you will see that there are some examples that are challenge-based, there are some that are project-based, and I'm not going to worry too much about the actual title that we are giving it, because the model that I'm going to be sharing tonight and the planning process can be applied to any one of these. So I hope that that helps to at least understand a little bit what the differences that are between these three models. And I think it's a great time to actually share an example of what this can look like in the classroom. So I don't know if anybody has ever seen this example, but it is adorable. It's called Too Many Geese, and this is an example of a primary classroom where they explored the issue of having too many geese in their schoolyard. And this is technically challenge-based learning, but again, they all fall under a similar umbrella. So if you want to go ahead in a moment here, Trish will share the link in the chat box. There we go. And when you're done watching the video, if you could just come back in and again raise your hand so I know that you're back, then we can continue on. Okay. It looks like just about everybody has finished watching the video. All right. So when we are thinking about why to engage in problem-based learning, it's not only to engage students, but it's also so that we give them an opportunity to develop their 21st century skills. And I have provided a link to this document in the resources. I'm just going to pause here. Dawn, perhaps we can go back and attach those links for you afterwards as well. Oh, thank you, Trish. So we want students to have the opportunity to really develop their 21st century skills. So when we're looking at what it is our students need to have when they're coming out of our school system, things like collaboration, communication, really that opportunity to show innovation and creativity, engaging in these types of activities really lend themselves to developing these skill sets in your students. And we know that these are not things that you can teach in isolation. All of these are utilized through problem-based learning. So this is not just, a fun approach to education, but it's really essential that we start to look at our pedagogy and how it is we are preparing our students for the future to be employable. So we're going to get into talking about developing a question. So how do you come up with a good problem-based learning question? And the first thing you have to decide really is, are you going to define that problem for your students, or are you going to let them develop that on their own? So for tonight, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about it as us presenting the information and the students finding the problem or the issue within that task. So some of the things that you really need to consider, first and foremost, is that you want to begin with your curriculum. So I've shown the social studies and science documents here because those are the ones that I tend to go to myself as a classroom teacher, but problem-based learning can emerge from any one of the content areas. So whether you're teaching art or you are teaching language, you can still find these issues within those documents. You need to know your why, and I think that's important with whatever it is we are doing in the classroom. Why do you want your students to engage in this? What is the key learning that you are hoping that they get out of this process? Really anticipate student thinking, and I laugh about this one because I think I have this down, and then students always seem to surprise me when they come up with an idea that I never anticipated. But if you have an idea of what you think your kids might come up with, it will help you to be better prepared to have resources available to guide their learning in the moment, or to be prepared to say, hey, you know what, I think that's interesting, but that's not something we are going to explore today. We really want to think about, is it relevant to students? So there are all kinds of real-world issues that we could explore, but if they are not something that your students can connect to, then this model is not going to work for your students. They will lose interest. So again, looking at food insecurity in the school that I was at, it was relevant to the students. Often they would come to school and not have enough food. So that was something that they were interested in addressing. Whereas, if we went across town to one of the other schools, that probably would not have been as successful for those students. So you have to look at where are they coming from, and what are they really going to be interested in. Does it provide opportunities for productive struggle? So we don't want this to be something that's easily solved. If it is, have they really developed problem-solving skills? Are there multiple solutions available? And that is also, yes, I'm just seeing engagement is key. Thank you, Kristen. You are so right. It's also very important to have multiple solutions. So often we have been engaged in carrying out a solution and it doesn't quite work out, and we have to go to plan B or plan C or plan D. Alternately, I've had years where I might have small groups all working on a different aspect of trying to solve the problem. Consider your timeline. So if you are getting started in problem-based learning near the end of the school year, make sure you're giving yourself enough time to adequately cover all of the elements. And if you don't think you have enough time, just go small. You can do something that only takes a couple of weeks and then build on that as well. So you're better off to provide your students the opportunity to be successful and then tack on some extra learning at the end. Lots of opportunities for cross-curricular learning, and we are going to talk more about that next session. And then finally, when you're thinking about your question, you want to ensure that you're being specific enough that everybody is going to stay on track, but you don't want it to be so strict that you don't have room for flexibility. And that can be a little bit of a trick, wording it just so, but that's something that hopefully we will work through this evening, and as you practice developing questions, you will see that it becomes easier. So down in the bottom here, we have another link, and in this video, the students identified an issue. So it was a grade 5 class, and we were looking at the social studies curriculum, and I presented a task in a way that I thought we would be able to pull some problem-based learning ideas out of the task, and that's exactly what happened. So I anticipated the student thinking in that sense, and I presented them with a problem. And if you click on this video and watch that, thank you, Trish. And then when you are done, if you want to just come back in and check as well. If you're having a problem with the links there, you might just want to copy and paste that link right into your browser. All right. So I think just about everybody is through here. Julian, glad to see you. Yes, Melanie, definitely. If it's a real-world problem, it would be a good question. Absolutely. And we will talk more about that. We're actually going to have an opportunity in a minute here to develop some questions together. So Julian, I'm really glad to see you here because your slide is up next. So I was doing some browsing on Twitter one day, and I actually came across this next slide here. I came across this tweet, and Julian is a teacher in, I believe, near Toronto area, and he had tweeted out some information about a challenge-based learning project that his students were working on, and I loved this one because they were looking at how they can improve relationships. So Melanie, going back to your question there, if it is a real-world problem, it would be a good question, yes. And I think the question that Julian's class came up with here indicates that. So improving relationships is something that is important whether you're in kindergarten or high school or you're one of the teachers working on staff. So the first thing that caught my eye was the nature of the question, which I thought was fantastic. And the second thing was the visual that he put up here. And looking at this visual, you can see all of the different subject areas that are connected. So I see some media, it looks like I'm at a blank here for this app. Julian might chime in and help me out here. Wordle, we've got lots of math here, so there's some data management happening. The students have mapped out, I believe, where the areas of greatest conflict were at the bottom here with X's. So there's lots of opportunities to connect various subject areas into one problem. And yes, Wordle, thank you, Jennifer. So Julian, I'm not sure if your mic is working, but if it is, it would be fantastic if you could chime in and just share with us a little bit about how this project emerged and how your students are doing with it.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm sorry.
We can.
coming in late here, but you pretty much nailed it. That's exactly what my students are working through. We started it right after the winter break, and it was actually them that came up with the issue, and then or the big idea, and then we worked our way to a problem that we wanted to solve. And we wanted to first measure what was the perception of conflict at recess versus how many conflicts were actually happening. And so that's what you see in the graphs on the right. And we sort of started to talk about, what is bullying? How many times do you think that bullying is happening at recess? And I don't know if bullying is the right word. How many times do you think conflict is happening at recess? And so we calculated like an average. We went outside and we measured it. Right now, part of challenge-based learning, and I know it's not necessarily part of problem-based learning, but part of challenge-based learning is that we don't want to jump to the solution too fast. We want to focus on questions. We want to focus on looking at our data, on interpreting our data. So what my students and I are doing right now is we've reached out to a few urban planners and architects in the city, and we want them to basically come into our classroom and help us out with the problem, with why do they think, because they're the ones that plan our city, and why do they think that we are having so many issues in this particular area, right? What do they do when you want to move large crowds, or because the issue that we're seeing is that there's too many kids in a small area. So we are trying to come up with a solution to that. And we're constantly having to revamp our solution. So like challenge-based learning and problem-based learning, like I said, isn't about the solution. It's about the questions, and it's about asking always more questions, right? So that's the step that we're at right now. And we are also working on PSAs for Pink Day that we're going to play on our Pink Day assembly at the end of February to, because we believe that maybe alerting students to that this is happening and this is real and this is our data, maybe, and them knowing that this is happening, behaviors will change. So what we have to do after we contact our urban planner and after we do our PSAs is we're going to then measure whether or not less conflict is happening, and that's pretty much it. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to anything I said there. I think this is fantastic. Just to talk about having community experts come into the school and talk to the students, and a piece that you mentioned there that I really love is looking at it again afterwards and seeing, whether or not you have had an impact or not. I think that's so great. I see a question here, sorry. What grade is this? And that's something I've actually never asked you, Julian. So this is in grade 4. I'm doing this in grade 4, but it can be something, like I saw the one that you have for grade 2, you did it in a grade 2 and 3 split class, right?
One of the projects, yes, yeah.
Right. So it can be done at any grade. Obviously the extent to which it's done is different, and the questions that you ask are different, but this could have been done in grade 1. Like I was teaching grade 1 last year, this could have been done in grade 1, right? It wouldn't look like this, but it could have been done in grade 1 as well. Absolutely,
and I would even suggest it could be done in grade 8 or higher.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And the depth you can take your students in would be totally different, but still, I've noticed one comment that I'd like to make really quick is I've noticed that my lessons don't really need a minds-on when they're about them solving a problem. They're already engaged. Like everybody's already engaged. So it's just, filtering, and it's really guiding the inquiry, right? And pointing it into the directions you want it to go, not jumping to the solution, and really focusing on our guiding questions and our essential questions that we're trying to solve, and measuring it, right? Doing a pre and a post.
Absolutely, and I often feel in the classroom like I am a tour guide more than a teacher, because you are doing exactly that. You are guiding them, and you're making sure that they're staying on track. which is fantastic. So I don't know if anybody else has any more questions for Julian. Maybe we could just pop those in the chat box, and Julian, you can keep an eye there to see if any come up. As well, you can see his Twitter handle right here as well if you want to follow him on Twitter and kind of see what kind of progress they're making. I know I'm excited to see how this rolls out throughout the year. Thank you very much for sharing your journey with us, Julian.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the rest of the presentation.
Excellent. So Julian talked about something there that is a larger project, more of a time commitment. And I just want to take a step back for a moment and talk about how if you're looking at engaging in problem-based learning and you're not sure about jumping into something so big right away, it is okay to get your feet wet in something that is smaller, or just to embed another problem-based learning activity throughout or within your classroom. So here I have an example of something that I've done in my classroom. I've done this more than once. So in grade 5, looking at measurement and at some of the curriculum expectations, I would pose this question to my students. It changes from year to year based on what the students are interested in. One year it was a Christmas tree that they wanted to have. One year it was a couch. They don't always get what they want out of it, but the problem is, how could we rearrange our classroom in order to have a blank area in it? So this is a problem that is relevant because it's their classroom space. It is a problem that is transferable, even thinking about their own bedrooms, and there is more than one solution. So within this problem, looking at the curriculum expectations, I would simply give the problem to the students and give them the time that they need, and embed mini lessons within the task as well, so giving them the opportunity to learn through the discovery. However, when we are looking at what is the most appropriate standard unit of measurement, when I had a student trying to measure the entire classroom length using millimeters, we had to have a quick little conversation about whether or not that was the most efficient strategy. But then looking at finding the perimeter of the classroom, the area of the classroom, the measurements of all of the furniture within the classroom, working together in groups to do this, and then creating a model that is fairly close to scale to show what the classroom could look like if we rearranged it in the way that they wanted. So I've had students do this on grid paper, I've had students use Lego, I've had students use cardboard, or using some kind of a software program or Google Drawings to create their model, and then actually following through with that. So it's always amusing when a student comes in the classroom and you've actually rearranged the room based on their group's model and it doesn't work. So, you know, there might be a table right in front of the doorway, or they might not have room to pull their chair out. And then they're very quick and eager to go back and revise their work and make the changes that are needed. So, you know, this is another example of giving the kids a task and letting them really learn through the discovery and the problem solving, working together, and it can happen in a much shorter time if you're just looking to gain that experience before you dig in. So I would like to actually get into some developing questions activities. So what I have done here is I've included 3 separate links, primary social studies, junior science, and intermediate science. And I recognize that perhaps there are some people in the room. I think I saw somebody teaches French. So I know that I didn't get all of the subject areas in, but I think that for tonight, just to work on developing the questions is, you know, we don't need to focus so much on what the content area is. So that being said, if you do want to explore a grade that you teach or a different subject area, by all means, dig into that curriculum when we're going through this activity, and I'll just ask that you put it in the appropriate division. So, for example, if you decide to look at junior art, that's great, and if you could just make sure that you include that in this link here. So when you select the link that you're going to explore, you're going to come into a Google Doc. And within that Google Doc, you will see I put in some of the overall expectations, and I put in a link to the curriculum, so the related curriculum document. And what I am hoping we can do is explore, so maybe pick one of the overall expectations, and there is a chart that you will find in your Google Doc. So just put in what expectation it is you are looking to explore, and then dig into that curriculum document and see what problems or what potential issues live within that document. So often as you're reading, you'll see a potential issue, and then you'll skip a couple expectations, and there it is again, and there it is again. So within that chart again, if you can just put the expectation numbers, please don't go through the hassle of typing out the entire text, and then thinking what kind of a question can come out of that. So Melanie actually already gave us an idea of a question, how she could make, or how they could make their community more accessible. So if Melanie is looking to explore that problem, you could just go in and look for the overall expectation that connects with that problem and the specific expectations that it addresses. So I think for this task, we will probably go for about 6 minutes or so. I don't know if Trish is able to add a timer, and maybe at 6 minutes we'll just measure, remind everybody that we're going to meet back, and I will pop in and out between the different documents just to see how everybody is doing. As well, there's a comment section, or a comment box, so please feel free to add comments to your fellow collaborators. If anybody is having an issue getting onto the doc, please let me know, and we have some alternate methods available.
Hey Jen, Trish here. Looks like a great activity. I'm going to recommend that when folks hear the timer, or if they finish early, if they use the green check mark this time instead of the raised hand. And those of you that have a raised hand, if you just click on that again, that'll clear it, and that way we'll know a little better what's going on. And yes, I'll set the timer for 6 minutes, starting shortly.
Okay, so Amanda, oh, there we go. Hopefully one of those will work. Thank you, Trish. Okay, so I'm just keeping an eye on, I see lots of great stuff happening within the docs. One thing that I'm noticing though is a lot of the questions that we're asking, and this is normal because this is what we're used to doing, but a lot of the questions that we are asking are questions that there is an answer to. So I'm actually going to pick on my friend here who is only showing up as Anonymous Camel, and because I love this question, it's a secondary question, and this question is, sorry, I'm just going back into my Blackboard here, flipping between screens. Bear with me, okay. So I'm going to put this question down in the box. Oh, it's not going in. Okay, so the question is, how bad is eating McDonald's for your body? So that is a very relevant question, especially for our secondary students. I have some kids of my own that are in high school, and I know they love to go down to McDonald's for lunch. So it is relevant, and definitely curriculum connections there, but I would suspect that with some research, we could all find that eating McDonald's probably isn't good for us. So how can we rephrase that question, or what can we do with that to lend itself to having multiple solutions? So I'm actually going to go back into the chat box, and if you all want to join me there and think about how could we rephrase that question, and how can we engage kids in that problem, because I love this problem. So I'm going to put it in the chat box. How bad is eating McDonald's for your body? So does anybody have any ideas for how we could change that problem to make it, there we go, how could we assess the impact of foods on the body system? What are the best choices to eat at McDonald's? Okay. So again, this goes back to anticipating your students. So putting yourself in the mindset of a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old high school student that wants to go down to McDonald's with their friends at lunch. It's as social as it is necessary for them in terms of getting food. Is there a way to make eating fast food not bad for you? Okay, I like that, Audra. So recognizing that this is probably a choice they are going to continue to make, but can we approach it in a way that eliminates the negative impact? What could McDonald's change to make food more healthy for kids? Excellent. So what could McDonald's do? So how can, I'm just looking here at all of these, how can we put these together and really get an idea? And I will say that this is often an activity I do with students where I will throw up a Padlet and we will look at a whole bunch of different questions that come out of a big idea and land on one together. And I will say that creating the question is probably the hardest part of the process. How can we encourage individuals to choose foods that are healthier for the human body? So it's about making healthier choices. And even just something as simple as how can we promote healthier eating when you are going to fast food restaurants? Yeah, how is part of the question. It does lend itself better to the solution, yes. When you have a what problem or how, or not a how, sorry, a what or a when, those questions have answers. So often what I will do is when we think we have a question, I will say to the kids, okay, hop on Siri or get on Google and see if you can find the answer to that problem. And if there is a clear-cut answer to the problem, then it is not a good question. It's not a good question for problem-based learning because you want that productive struggle. You want to have lots of possible solutions. So if somebody else has already solved it and that solution is readily available, then it is not worth exploring if you really want to dig in to a true problem-based learning experience. So thinking about how, checking if that solution exists. And yes, Melanie, it does put ownership on the students. And often in my own practice, I would rush through trying to get that problem hammered in so we could really dig in and start the journey. And after making that mistake once or twice, I realized that taking a step back and really taking the time to develop the question is worth it in the long run. It will guide your whole journey and it will keep you on track. How can we be sure that we are choosing healthy foods? That's a really great one as well because then we're not even looking at science, but then we can tie in some health and nutrition and we can start looking at reading labels and understanding what it is that's in our food, what ingredients are we eating. So there are more cross-curricular activities. Or how could we educate others about choosing healthy foods is another way we could tweak that. So now all of a sudden, just by adding a couple of words, we've opened it up that we can create public service announcements or, we can do some surveys and we can collect some data. How does this question relate to the curriculum? So that is a good question, Michelle. I'm going to be completely honest. I have never taught secondary, so this is one of our secondary colleagues that shared that curriculum expectation and the overall expectation and the problem, so I would have to dig in. But I am just trusting that there are some specific expectations that live within that overall expectation. And really, that is another key piece. So you might have a really great problem, but if you can't connect it to your curriculum, then it's not the time for it. Making students part of developing the question is key. Yes, sometimes it's okay to not know where we are going. The struggle is real, definitely. So I'm just going to move on from this one right now and continue exploring a little bit as a group, just paying attention to time here. I'm going to leave those Google Docs live, and I will be checking in on them from time to time. So if this is something you want to continue practice with after the webinar is done, please feel free to do that, and I'm happy to pop on and to continue to give some feedback. So Scott, how does, before I go on, how does McDonald's menu fit into the food groupings of the Canada Food Guide? So again, I really like the idea of connecting that. However, it probably could be answered fairly easily, but we could switch that and say, how could McDonald's change their menu to better fit into the food groupings? So just thinking about those little changes so that there are not concrete answers to your problem. So what's the hook for your students? So we've done a little bit of work with developing the questions. You want your students to engage in that process as well as possible, and even in grade 2 I've done this. So how are you going to get them excited about this idea? How are you going to kind of hook them or reel them in? So for me, often it's done through literacy. So here's a couple examples of some books that I was reading with a class, and out of that came how can we help our local community. So sometimes it's sharing a personal story. It could be a newspaper article. It could be Twitter. So there are lots of different ways that you can get your kids excited or interested in a topic. And actually, it's funny because McDonald's was a topic we explored. We brought in some food from our breakfast program, and there was some toast and yogurt and a cheese slice, and we brought in a McDonald's meal, and we set them both out in the room for quite a while, actually until I got in trouble a couple of times from the health and safety team. And we wanted to look at what would happen to both of the breakfast items. So which one looked normal longer, and McDonald's, our Egg McMuffin stayed the same for about a month, whereas our other food didn't look so great. Anyways, I digress here. So what is the hook for students? So if we were looking, yeah, it was disgusting, Jennifer, but it was a very good learning experience, and it really got, it sent the message home about the impact of the food that we were putting in our body and preservatives and whatnot. So if we were looking at the problem, how can we keep our local environment healthy? What types of provocations could you think of? So just in the chat box, if we wanted to talk about keeping our local environment healthy, how could you generate that conversation with your students? So keeping your local environment healthy. And what areas are we doing well, and what areas can we improve? Okay. So how are we going to actually get them to think about the issue? And sometimes I like to think about, like, how are we going to get them really concerned, almost a little bit of shock, if you will. Pick up garbage on a walk around the school. Yeah, so often it doesn't take far. So going on a community walk, I see a lot of that. Yep, go on a community walk. and talk about the amount of garbage that you see there, images of an unhealthy environment, particularly your own if you're talking about a local environment. Scoop some water from a local stream, that's a great idea. Clean up the schoolyard after the winter. Discussion afterwards. So thinking about the wider local community. Yeah, going to a park, just go to a local park. Lots of schools have parks near them. Take a look at and see what are you finding there. A lot of our parks aren't as safe as we want them to be. Yeah, so taking a look at CBC News there's a link looking at the flooding in southwestern Ontario, right? Talking about that, talking about waste management. Keeping account of the garbage in a classroom. Okay, so you guys see there are lots of ideas here. Lots of ideas here to get the conversation started, and these are all things that you can do, you know, within one period. If you're going for a walk, you know, go out for a walk and have a talk about it, or present some pictures and news articles, and get the kids concerned. So that really, when this big issue emerges, even though you've known about it and you're planning for it, they're going to think it's their own idea. And my experience has always been when the kids think that they are the ones that discovered the issue, and they think that they are the ones that are talking you into trying to solve it, they are going to be the ones that are engaged and excited. And just like Julian said, you don't even have to do a mind in. They're coming in often, like running in the classroom, excited and ready to tackle the issue and continue their learning. And yes, Kristen, making it real, that is so key. It's really the most important piece here. So in my grade 5-6 class, we were looking at how we can make affordable, healthy food accessible to our community. So that was the problem we landed on. And it did start with, is it accessible? And we realized that was easily answered. They knew the answer to that. So once they identified the issue, we decided it was time to learn more about it. So that was where the research happened. We're going to talk a little bit more about what research can look like on the next slide. But if you want to go ahead and click on the link there, I think Trish will put that in the chat box for us again. And it's just a quick 2-minute clip. And you'll hear this, what the students discussed. So the students in the last clip, what they discovered through their research and how they kind of set the stage for the action plan that we ended up developing. So when you're done, if you can click the green check to let me know you're back, that'd be great. I see some people checking in as they're getting back with the green check there. That's great. We'll just give it a couple of more seconds here and we'll continue on, just in terms of timing. Okay. So when you're looking at research with your students, some things that you want to think about is here, how are you going to keep your research together? Is it going to allow students to collaborate Is your research grade appropriate? So I like to think about platforms like I use Google Classroom and Google Drive quite a bit. It really lends itself nicely to delivering resources to students and to students sharing and collaborating with each other. In primary grades, I have often used, so I'll make a Google Doc and I will load that up with video links, pictures, articles that I want the students to go to, and then we just create a QR code and post that in the classroom. So the students, it's almost like a sandboxed research where they can scan that QR code and they can find the relevant information that is age appropriate for that student. As well, when I'm working with modified students, I like to do the same thing for them so that they still have the same access to information. So perhaps somebody may have some challenges in terms of their reading level. So you can provide some videos to those students, or you can provide some images or text that can be read back to them. So thinking about how you're going to get that information to the students. We know it's, the research is an important piece, but we can't just set our students free on the internet and expect them to come up with the proper information. And then thinking about existing student knowledge. Often your students will have some expertise, especially if the issues are relevant, so talk to them. Look at newspapers, magazines, going on field trips, and something Julian mentioned, just interviewing an expert. So you may be able to get somebody to come into your school, or it could be something that's done via Skype. And then throughout that research, as the students are discovering, what has already been done to try and address this issue, what has worked, what hasn't worked, often they will land on a potential solution on their own. So when we were looking at making food accessible in our community, I really anticipated that what we would be doing is raising awareness, but actually what came out of this problem was something I had not anticipated. So if you want to go ahead and there's another YouTube link, it's only 1 minute long, and just looking at the time, we will probably move on in about 1.5 minutes. So if you want to check in when you're back, that'd be great. Thank you, Trish. Okay, so I see lots of people back. Awesome. So sometimes we anticipate things and they just don't turn out the way we planned, but that's okay. So when your students come up with a potential solution, some things to consider. Is it realistic? So is this something you can actually do? If it's not, then you need to let them know, because you don't want to set your kids up for failure either. Is it safe? I had a couple of students that wanted to look at how they could try and reduce child abuse in their community, and I felt like that would not be an emotionally safe avenue for us to venture down. I'm not qualified enough to deal with that. So while I felt like it was a very relevant, very valid, very important conversation, I didn't think that it was safe for my grade 5 and 6 students to explore. So remember that you have that, you have that final say. Is it meaningful? Thinking about, are we respecting the rights of others? Another really important piece to consider here is, are we paying attention to the timelines of your subject? So if you're teaching health, and it's one unit, you're not going to give too much time to that strand. So that's where you want to make sure that you can tie in other subject areas, maybe some math or language. We want to look at allowing for collaboration, community engagement. If it's already been solved, why would we do it again? Having a backup plan, and then most importantly, is it student developed? Okay, and sorry, we're just moving right along here. So now we're creating an action plan. So we had the idea to create the little free pantry. Well, then what are we going to do after that? So then you have to come up with some steps for how you're going to achieve your goal, what types of barriers exist, and how are you going to overcome these. So an example here, how can we help our local community? This was a grade 2-3 class that I had, and they landed on helping our local food bank. And our action plans were donating time, raising awareness. So as Julian mentioned, we, having that pre and post assessment is really important. So we surveyed our community with a test group of 50 before we made our public service announcements, and then we surveyed them again afterwards, and we compared the data to determine that we had made an impact. They wanted to make artwork to make the food bank more inviting and raising money for the food bank. So again, we have one more link that we're going to look at here, another YouTube video. And when you're done, again, just pop on over and check in. And we'll resume in about 3 minutes. Okay, so I see lots of people back. And it seems, despite my best intentions, we're almost out of time here. So our next slide, we were going to look at brainstorming potential solutions to the problem and coming up with an action plan, but I'm actually going to save that activity for our next session on March 20th, just to give it the time that I think it deserves. I don't want to rush through here too fast, and I know it's almost 9 o'clock and everybody has to get up early tomorrow. But I am going to skip forward and I'm going to talk a little bit more about setting the stage here for your problem-based learning journey. So I like to assign students or put them into small groups or teams so that everybody isn't working on the exact same thing at the same time, particularly in a primary classroom. And so with the students, we determine what roles or what jobs will need to be filled within the classroom. So you can see some pictures here. We had a public relations team that brought a proposal to the United Way to ask for $1,000 for projects that they wanted to complete in the classroom. Here my public relations team is actually on the radio, so they had contacted the media and asked if they could have some airtime to talk about their project and raise awareness. Thinking about things like a secretary, tech support, so the behind the scenes people at an activity like this. We have photographers to document the journey. So really thinking about what are all the roles that could exist within the classroom, almost so that this is running like a business or a team, with you as the supervisor. And another great activity I love to tie in is I have some application forms I make up, and this actually came out of my grade 2 students not knowing their addresses or birth dates. So I thought it was a great way to get that information down. We tied in some persuasive writing, and they had to apply for the jobs within the classroom, and then I would hold interviews, and they actually had to secure that position and compete with each other for those jobs. So again, when they have their roles, they are they're much more committed to their responsibilities when it's something that they have actively sought out and worked to have. So that's always a fun piece that we throw in. So let's just see here. There we go. So staying organized, and this is key. And I'll be honest, the first time I went through problem-based learning, I don't know that I was as organized as I should have been, and after the fact, when I was trying to get resources together or find a picture or find an article, I had a really hard time finding what I was looking for. So using a template or some form of tracking system, Google Drive again is something that I love in terms of compiling pictures and student work. I have added a link here that Trish will share with you in the chat box, and this is a template you are welcome to copy. So this is another way that you can kind of keep yourself organized and on track and just aware of the different steps that are included, what responsibilities fall on you as the classroom teacher, what are you looking for your students to do here. I often insert any links or even a video into this template if I've used it, just so that when I go back to this later on, I can find it. And as you're thinking about staying organized and you're going through the journey and you're working on your action plan, it's really important to keep referring back to your curriculum, because that is, that's why we're doing this. We're trying to deliver the content. We're trying to build conceptual understanding through these experiences. So ensuring that you are honoring the curriculum that you are supposed to be teaching, you're looking for opportunities to connect other curriculum expectations, and just staying on track this way is really important. And I think it's worth saying at this point too that it's okay if this is a messy process. I'd love to hear Julian's thoughts on this one, but I know for myself, every year we have ended up landing somewhere that I didn't expect us to land in terms of our project, and gone off in directions I didn't anticipate, but we have still solved the problem and we have remained true to both the curriculum expectations and the problem we are looking to address. So on March 20th, we will be meeting back again. We are going to actually begin with a little activity around developing your action plan. We're going to talk about tying in cross-curricular expectations. We're going to talk about what assessment can look like along the way. I will be checking in with those Google Docs along the way to see if anybody has any more questions. You're welcome to email me or tweet me. If you have any questions right now, I'm going to stick around for a little bit, and you can pop them in the chat box, and I would be more than happy to answer anything there. And I know that Trish has some resources that I've shared for you as well. I think they're on the next slide here. There we go. So we have some resources if you want to go back and take a look at any of these items. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. It has been a great session. I feel like we packed a lot in, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.
All right. Terrific, Jennifer. Thank you so much. Wow. And I sure hope folks can join on the 20th. If not, remember, you can register for it and then see the discussion afterwards as well. So I'm going to put a messy one in the chat right now because it's long. It's this page of resources. So I'm just going to pop that in right now. I did my best to shorten them up a bit for you. At this time, I am going to stop the recording just to let you know that the chat gets recorded as well. So I noticed that somebody else had popped in an extra link, so that's another way to follow along. So just listen as the recording is stopped, and then I have a few more things to mention to you.